My name is Eleanor Whitman. I am 82 years old. At this stage of life, you'd think the years would bring peace. Quiet mornings, soft chairs by the window, afternoons of tea and memories. But sometimes age doesn't bring peace. It brings contempt. It brings betrayal. And sometimes the knife doesn't come from strangers. It comes from your own flesh and blood. I was sitting at the kitchen table that afternoon, the sun pouring through lace curtains, casting gentle patterns across the worn wood. I had just finished folding laundry, my own clothes, and a pile of my daughter's that she had dumped in the basket with mine. My hands ached from the effort, but I folded them anyway. Habit, love, duty. I heard voices in the hallway, my daughter Clara and her husband Paul. Their words carried easily into the kitchen. "She's useless," Clara hissed, her voice sharp as glass. "All she does is take up space and complain. I'm sick of it." Paul chuckled. "What did you expect? She's old. That's what old people do. Burden everyone else." Froze. My chest clenched as if someone had tied a rope around it and pulled. Clara's footsteps came closer, and then she entered the kitchen, arms folded, eyes cold. She didn't even flinch at the sight of me sitting there, as if she knew I had heard and didn't care. "You're just sitting there again," she said. "Do you know how exhausting it is to carry all this weight while you just sit? You don't even try to help anymore. You're an old fool." The words hit harder than a slap. My own daughter. The same girl I once rocked to sleep during long winter nights. The same child I'd carried on my hip through markets, whispering stories into her ear. An old fool. I stared at her, my lips parting to speak, but nothing came. The silence stretched, heavy, until Paul leaned against the doorframe and smirked. "You know, Clara," he said lightly, "if your mother had any sense, she'd already have made arrangements. Maybe she thinks she'll live forever." Clara laughed, short and cruel. "She doesn't even have anything worth leaving behind. What could she possibly give?" I felt the blood drain from my face. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was powerless. But in that moment of devastation, something inside me shifted. Because tucked away in a locked drawer upstairs was the truth, a will I had rewritten years ago, one that Clara had never seen. She thought she would inherit everything. She thought she could belittle me, erase me, and still walk away with the fruits of my life. She had no idea that her name wasn't anywhere on it. As Clara poured herself a glass of water, she glanced at me with a sneer. "Don't look so shocked, Mother. You're lucky we even let you stay here." I forced my trembling hands into my lap, but inside the fire was already burning. She thought I was a burden. She thought I was an old fool. But soon she would find out the truth. And when she did, it would destroy her. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. I didn't always see Clara this way. Once upon a time, she was my little girl with golden curls and sticky fingers from stolen jam. She used to climb into my lap after school, press her cheek against mine and whisper, "Don't ever leave me, Mama." I would laugh and promise her I never would. For years we were inseparable. When her father, Thomas, died suddenly of a heart attack, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked 2 jobs. Morning shifts at the library, evenings cleaning offices, just to keep the lights on. And through all of it, Clara clung to me, swearing she'd make me proud. She did for a time. She graduated near the top of her class, married young, had children of her own. I was there for all of it. Every scraped knee, every school recital, every sleepless night when the babies were teething. I gave her everything I had left to give. But slowly, things began to change. The first crack came when she married Paul. He had a way of looking at people as if he was calculating their worth in dollars and cents. The first time I met him, he shook my hand like a salesman sealing a deal, and when his eyes flicked over the furniture in my living room, I knew he was measuring more than just wood and fabric. At first, Clara was still gentle with me. She'd call on Sundays, ask me to watch the children, thank me for casseroles. But after a while, her voice started to carry his edge. She'd sigh when I asked too many questions, roll her eyes when I offered advice, laugh softly but cruelly when I misheard something and asked her to repeat it. The little cuts piled up. One afternoon I found that my photograph, the one of me and Thomas on our wedding day, had been moved from the mantel into a drawer. In its place stood a new family portrait of Clara, Paul, and their children. No trace of me. As if I had never existed in the story at all. Another day, when my hip ached so badly I could barely stand, I asked Clara if she could take me to the doctor. She sighed, tapped at her phone and said, "I can drop you off. You'll have to figure out a ride back. I don't have time to babysit." Babysit. That's what my own daughter called spending time with me. It was in moments like these that I saw her heart harden. Every remark chipped away at what we once had. Every gesture reminded me that I was no longer her mother. Not really. I was an obligation. Burden. And yet, through all of it, she never once doubted that my life savings, my home, and my inheritance would one day belong to her. She never asked. She never wondered. She assumed. I remember one spring afternoon when I came by with a loaf of bread, still warm from the oven. The door was ajar, and I heard her on the phone, her voice sharper than usual. "She's not our responsibility," Clara said. "She should have saved more." Honestly, the only reason I put up with her is because I'll inherit everything anyway. The word stabbed deep, clean and cold. I set the bread quietly on the counter and walked out before she noticed me. That evening, I went home and unlocked the top drawer of my dresser. I pulled out the envelope containing my will, the one I had revised after Thomas died. I unfolded it slowly, the thick paper steady in my trembling hands, and read the names written there. Clara's name was nowhere to be found. Her arrogance would be her downfall. She thought I had nothing. She thought she could strip me of dignity, reduce me to an old fool, and still claim everything I had built. But the day was coming when she would learn the truth. And when that day arrived, the ground beneath her perfect little world would collapse. The next morning at breakfast, Clara slid a stack of papers across the table. "We've made an appointment with a social worker," she said coolly. "It's time to make some decisions about your future." I smiled faintly, though my heart pounded. She had no idea I had already made mine. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. The morning Clara slid those papers across the table, I knew the storm I had been dreading had finally arrived. They weren't bills. They weren't recipes. They weren't anything ordinary. They were glossy pamphlets, brochures for assisted living facilities, nursing homes with names like Golden Acres and Meadow Rest, all smiling faces and staged photographs of gray-haired men tossing balloons in sunlit rooms. Clara tapped the top one with her finger, her nails clicking against the table like a gavel. "We have an appointment with a social worker this week. She'll help us get you set up properly." Set up properly. As if I were a misplaced chair or a box of junk cluttering her perfect house. I stared at the papers, my throat tightening. "You're sending me away." Clara sighed, exasperated, as if I were a child refusing medicine. "Don't be dramatic, Mother. This is what's best for everyone. You'll have company your own age. Professional care. And we'll have peace of mind." Peace of mind. For her. Paul stepped into the room, tying his tie, smugness dripping off every word. "It's the responsible thing to do, Eleanor. You can't keep expecting us to carry the burden forever. You need more help than we can give." Burden. There it was again, that word they tossed around like a stone, always landing on my chest. "I don't need to be put away," I whispered, though my voice cracked, thin and fragile. Clara leaned forward, her eyes hard. "You do. And honestly, you should be grateful. Most people don't have children willing to take the time to arrange these things. You're lucky. Lucky. Grateful. Those words burned hotter than fire. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not my daughter, not the little girl with jam on her cheeks, but a woman who saw me as an obstacle, a weight chained to her ankle. Clara, I said softly, I gave you everything. Every penny, every sacrifice. And this is what I am to you. A burden you want to tuck away in some home until I fade. She didn't flinch. She didn't waver. She just said, yes. The air left my lungs. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself, the room spinning. Paul stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was confiding some wisdom. You should sign over power of attorney. It'll make things easier. Clara can handle everything for you. He slid a form across the table, the blank line for my signature glaring up at me like a threat. I felt my chest tighten, my palms damp. They wanted not just to send me away. They wanted control over my entire life. My money, my choices, my very existence. And in that moment, I was powerless to stop them. Tears blurred my vision. My cane clattered as I pushed back from the table and staggered toward my room. Clara called after me. Don't start with the dramatics, Mother. We'll talk later. Talk later. As if the decision had already been made. Inside my room, I collapsed onto the bed. The tears came fast, hot, unstoppable. I buried my face in the quilt Thomas and I had shared, muffling my sobs so they wouldn't hear the sound of me breaking. Every humiliation of the past years, every cold remark, every dismissal pressed down on me all at once. I thought of the birthday dinners where I was pushed to the corner, the holidays where my name was barely acknowledged, the countless times I was told I was too slow, too weak, too old. And now they were stripping away the last of it. My dignity, my independence, my place in the world. I lay there for hours, my body heavy with grief, until the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the room. I felt like a ghost in my own home, already erased from the life I had built. For the first time in 82 years, I felt truly invisible. And yet, in the corner of my mind, a faint light flickered. A memory of the will in my dresser. The names on that paper. The names missing from it. But that night I wasn't ready to grasp it. That night, I was only a mother crushed by the cruelty of her own child. As I drifted into a restless sleep, I heard voices downstairs, Clara and Paul laughing. Laughing as they spoke of how much easier things will be, once I was gone. They thought they had won. They had no idea that the very thing they coveted would be the blade that cut them down. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? For 2 days after that conversation, I moved like a ghost through Clara's house. I ate when food was put in front of me, nodded when questions were asked, kept my voice low, my presence smaller. Clara thought she had crushed me. Paul thought I was broken. But inside, I was sharpening my silence into a blade. On the third morning, when Clara was out dropping the children at school and Paul was gone to work, I opened the top drawer of my dresser. My hand trembled slightly, not from weakness but from anticipation. Beneath neatly folded sweaters lay a locked tin box, the kind Thomas used to keep his pay stubs in. My fingers found the key taped to the underside of the drawer. I turned it in the lock and lifted the lid. There it was. The will. The thick, cream-colored paper that carried more power than any cane, any protest, any cry for mercy. My name at the top. The signature of Ruth Leonard, my lawyer, neat and firm. And most importantly, the absence of Clara's name. I unfolded it slowly, as though unwrapping a weapon. Every line, every clause was exactly as I remembered. Scholarships for children who needed them. A trust for my grandchildren. Donations to the library and the community center. But nothing for Clara. Not a dime. She thought she was securing her future by tearing mine apart. She had no idea her future was already gone. Still, rage alone is not a plan. I needed timing. I needed witnesses. I needed a stage large enough for her arrogance to collapse in front of everyone she cared about. That evening I made an excuse about needing fresh air and walked slowly to the corner store. My cane tapped against the sidewalk, each step steadying me further. From the payphone outside I dialed Ruth's office. "Eleanor," Ruth's calm voice answered. I was expecting this call. I swallowed hard. "It's time." We met 2 days later in her office above the florist. The smell of roses drifted through the vents. I handed her the will, my fingers reluctant to let go, but her eyes were steady. She slid it into a folder, tapping the edge. "Do you want to keep this quiet until after you pass, Eleanor? Or do you want them to know now?" My lips pressed together. For years, I had told myself it would be easier to leave it unspoken, to let the truth rise only after I was gone. But now, Clara had stripped me of dignity while I was still alive. She would see her downfall with her own eyes. "I want it read aloud," I said firmly. "With her in the room." Ruth nodded slowly, understanding. "Then we'll arrange it. Bring her and Paul in under the guise of updating paperwork. I'll handle the rest." When I left that office, my heart no longer ached the way it had before. The grief was still there, yes, but it had been replaced with something sharper. Purpose. The days that followed were a quiet waiting game. Clara and Paul went about their lives, smug and certain, talking openly about how much easier things would be once I was settled. They had no idea I was already settled on their destruction. Sometimes late at night doubt would creep in. I was 82. My body ached. My memory wasn't what it used to be. Could I really follow this through? But then I would hear Clara's voice in my head. "You're useless. You're a burden. You're an old fool." And the doubt turned back into steel. The morning of the meeting, Clara drove me into town, humming to the radio as if nothing were amiss. Paul sat in the back seat, scrolling on his phone. I watched them in the reflection of the window. Two vultures who thought they were circling an easy prey. But they had no idea the prey had claws. When we arrived, Ruth greeted us warmly and led us into her office. Papers were stacked neatly on the table, waiting. Clara glanced at them, her eyes gleaming with greedy expectation. "Finally," she whispered to Paul. "We'll get everything in order." I lowered myself into the chair, my cane resting across my lap. My pulse quickened. This was it. The trap was set. Ruth opened the folder, adjusted her glasses, and cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I think it's time we review Eleanor's will." Clara leaned forward eagerly, her smile wide. And I, for the first time in years, felt my own lips curve into a smile just as sharp. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. Ruth shuffled the papers, her voice calm but commanding. "This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Whitman. I'll begin with the general provisions before we get to the specifics." Clara's eyes gleamed as she leaned forward in her chair. She looked like a child unwrapping a present too early on Christmas morning. Paul sat back, arms crossed, smug as ever. They expected to hear their names tied to everything I had spent my life building. But anticipation can be a cruel thing. Ruth continued. "Eleanor Whitman, being of sound mind and memory, does hereby declare this to be her final will." Clara cut in impatiently. Yes, we get that part. Just get to the inheritance." Ruth's eyes flicked up briefly, a spark of disapproval passing through them before she read on. "To my beloved grandchildren Owen and Emily Whitman, I leave a trust to be accessed upon their 18th birthdays, to fund their education and future opportunities." Paul frowned, tilting his head. Clara shifted in her seat, her smile stiffening slightly. "To the Maplewood Public Library, where I was employed for many years, I leave a donation to support literacy programs for children." The color drained from Clara's face. "To the Maplewood Trade Scholarship Fund, I leave a sum to support young men and women in learning carpentry, plumbing, and other skills vital to our community." My daughter's lips parted, trembling. Her fingers dug into the arms of her chair. "Wait, what about me?" she demanded. "What about the house? What about everything else?" Ruth didn't flinch. She turned to the final page, her voice clear. "To my daughter, Clara Whitman." She paused, the silence slicing through the room. "I leave nothing." The words fell like a hammer. Clara shot to her feet, her chair screeching across the floor. "Nothing. Nothing." Her voice cracked, shrill, desperate. "You can't do that. I'm your daughter. I took care of you." I finally spoke, my voice steady, sharp as glass. "You didn't take care of me. You mocked me. You called me useless, burden, an old fool. And while you served me scraps and plotted to ship me off like unwanted furniture, I was writing you out of my life." Her face twisted with rage and disbelief. "You're lying. This is fraud. It's—" Ruth slid the signed, notarized documents across the table. "It's perfectly legal. Every line, every signature." Paul snatched the papers, his hands shaking as he flipped through them, searching desperately for some loophole, some mistake. There was none. Clara collapsed back into her chair, her body crumpling as if the weight of the truth had finally broken her spine. But I counted on it," she whispered. "I gave you my time. You gave me contempt," I cut in. "And contempt earns you nothing." The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara's sobs broke it, raw and pitiful, the sound of a woman realizing she had destroyed her own future with her arrogance. Paul's jaw clenched. He stood abruptly, muttering something about wasted time, and stormed out of the office. He didn't even look back at her. I stayed seated, cane resting across my lap, watching my daughter unravel. For years she had treated me as if I were invisible. But in this moment, she couldn't look anywhere but at me, the mother who had just turned her world to ash. When it was over, I rose slowly, leaning on my cane, and walked to the door. I paused long enough to look back at her one last time. "You thought you could erase me," I said softly. "But it's you who will be erased. Remember that every time you look at what you've lost." I left her there, broken and hollow. The aftermath was swift. Word spread quickly through town. Small towns always talk. People whispered about how Clara had tried to dump her own mother into a home, only to discover she had been cut out of the will. Her reputation crumbled. Friends avoided her. Parents at the school whispered in hallways. Even Paul grew distant until one day he didn't come back. As for me, I spent my days in peace. The house that once felt like a prison became my sanctuary again. I sat by the window with tea, read books from the library I had helped, and tended the garden Thomas and I once planted. I wasn't just surviving. I was free. And sometimes when the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the yard, I thought back to that day at the kitchen table. The day Clara called me useless, a burden, an old fool. Smiled. Because in the end it was her name missing, not mine. She mocked me, dismissed me, and plotted to cast me aside. But in the end, it wasn't my name that vanished. It was hers. The inheritance she thought she owned disappeared right in front of her. And all that was left was the taste of regret. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you found yourself holding your breath, if you felt my pain and my victory, then I'd love for you to stay with me for the next story. Subscribe to the channel today, and together we'll keep uncovering the truths people try to hide.